Kingdom men should be the heroes of the house. The first to say, ain't no evil in my house. See, as for me,
Everybody to the Underground Railroad. This is Sam, and I'm here with Marta today, and we're going to be talking about healing and about experiences in our life that may have been traumatic and kind of overcoming it. It's I know people probably think, man, you beat that horse to death with that, but it's important that people realize that your responses to things, man, you're accountable to God for how you respond to things, and but also know that there's other people who have gone through similar situations, and it's not really anything to be ashamed of. I mean, we're all sharing this thing called life, and so Marta, I appreciate you showing up today, and uh, we'd like to know what experience you're willing to share with us today, like of an experience that may have been traumatic or a breaking of trust. Uh, just a story, kind of a brief overview of maybe something you experienced that was traumatic or breach of trust.
Oh, well, um, I have a lot of those actually, but I have a lot of those. I grew up in a very abusive home, had very abusive relationships. Um, but the one that I think where the Lord can talk about healing is I was in 1969, I was engaged, and the guy I was engaged to ended up going to Vietnam. And I had been going through a lot of things, and I was drinking a lot, and I had gone to a place and had too much to drink and had asked a friend for a ride home. Well, that friend took me out to the park and raped me. And I never said a word to anybody. I was almost 19 years old, never said a word to one person. And I never said a word about it until I was 30 years old. And I was 29 actually, and I told my mother, who had come to visit me where I was, and her words to me were, "It's okay. I was too." And I was astounded. That was the whole entire conversation. And I was 29, so it was 10 years after that had happened to me, because the shame I felt and the guilt I felt because I was drinking. How I coped with it, this is the first time I've said this in public. So how I coped with it was I actually created an imaginary miscarriage, because I had to get it outside of me. And so in my mind,
Yeah.
I'd had a miscarriage. And in later years, I actually did have a miscarriage. But I told everybody that was my second miscarriage. And it was not until maybe less than 10 years ago that uh, the Lord brought me through all of that pain and trauma and showed me the truth that I didn't have a miscarriage, but that was the only way that I could cope with what had happened to me, was to get it outside of me. So
Yeah.
the process of how the Lord healed me was one of embracing love, of just as I began to ask the Lord about this particular topic, because there's a lot you can say about it. Um, he kept talking to me about there's healing in his wings. I said, but what does that mean? Well, it means he's our covering. He's our security. He's our safety. And so the more intimate you become with him, the more whole you become, because love heals, because love always wins. And it took a long time for me to walk out of a religious mindset and allow the love of God to come in and heal me, that it wasn't something I could do, it was something I had to receive. So healing to me is three things. It's based on love, restoration, and receiving. And it's what God did. God died so that we would be healed. It's what it says. And he healed us, and it's up to all we have to do is surrender to his love and allow that to be. Now, he can, as individual of the part of the body of Christ that we are, that's how individual healing is. It can come through many, 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 many forms. So, and it's usually not what one expects. So, okay, that's what I've got to say about that for the moment.
Yeah, no, so because you said a lot, I naturally have always had this question, and I've always been curious as to, so the Bible a lot of times talks about, safety and, like you said, underneath your wings, and needs your covering. And man, like as you look back, I know I've asked people this question before, but it's only natural, and everybody does ask this, and other than the why questions, but people are always like, well, why didn't you protect me? And I think it's natural for people to grapple with that. So did you grapple with that? And how did you resolve that issue of like feeling like, hey, like what do you mean you protected me and I just got raped in a park by a friend?
Well,
that's a horrible use of like
I
trust
know. That broke a lot of things in me, I can tell you.
Yeah.
I didn't know the Lord when that happened. And
Okay.
but I always had a sense of something greater than me. I've always been a seeker, and I didn't know. I don't look at it as though God allowed that to happen to me. I believe that the enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And we all have the free will. I don't understand how it all works together, but I've never been mad at God about it because I don't believe that God ever, ever hurts us. I don't think when people say God allows things, well, we, because of our own nature and our where we are in our thinking and our choices and our behaviors, and we open doors for the enemy. I don't understand all that emotional stuff, but God is love. So when I got saved and I inquired, he showed me that every experience in my life, he took me back to the womb because that was a major trauma too. Um, I was rejected from birth. I was spoken rejection. So that's a tough one to overcome. But he showed me, I thought it was like a red carpet, but I didn't understand at the time. And he showed me that everything that I've gone through was in the blood of Jesus. And he showed me that. So I knew that as bad as everything was, I still had my life and I had God, and he loved me. And I knew that beyond a shadow of a doubt that God loved me. Now, what I did with that and how I walked that out, that's a whole nother story. But I knew that. And then I met religion, and yeah. So that was a whole nother thing. Yeah.
So is there a way I could like, in a sense, step you back? But so like, what emotions did you feel like during and after the trauma? Like in a way that somebody might be able to understand that's never happened to, like,
Right.
what were the real like effects to you?
You feel immediate shame. It took away my self-worth, and my self-esteem was low anyway. It affected how I trust was broken with almost everybody. Well, trust was broken with everybody. I didn't trust anybody, and I built a facade around me to protect myself. And I was I was what everybody called a chameleon. I could fit in anywhere because I just didn't want anybody to see the real me. I had to hide uh, from what happened and from who I was, and it was my fault. If I hadn't have been there, if I hadn't have been drinking, if I hadn't have been this, if I hadn't have been that, um, I had to work through all of those things. And it took me a long time, I'm not gonna lie, because I wouldn't even admit that I felt ashamed. And then I got, many years later, uh, I had to learn to forgive, which was a big part of the healing. Forgiveness, I think, is a big part of healing. And I had to walk through and learn uh, to forgive the person who did it, whose name I knew, whose face I knew, who I saw after that. And I can remember the first time a friend said, "You have to pray for him." I'm like, "You got to be kidding." And I said, "No, I'm not going to do it." And I didn't.
Right.
I'm like, "No, I didn't." So, yeah, it's guilt and shame um, that
So,
you're responsible. I was responsible
so
because I put myself in the wrong place at the wrong time, trusted the wrong person. So it made me question every choice I made from there going forward. So I just, yeah, I started living a very passive life because of that, among other things. Yeah, there were other things that made my life become passive, but that was a major one.
so now, after you like kind of develop like this, we'll call it the chameleon and a different facade, and like
Uh-huh.
these are your defense mechanisms. Because you naturally, everybody wants to be safe. Nobody wants to go through life and ever have those types of things happen again. So they're just trying to figure out the best way to kind of keep that from happening. So like, what were the like social implications of the defense mechanisms that you created?
Oh my goodness.
Like, how did people treat you? Or like, you have these new reactions to people and new emotions, and
Well,
like, so you
I
have these
buried,
things like, how are people treating you now?
I just buried it because nobody knew. So I became the belle of the ball. I became the happy girl, the jokester, the one, and I became the one who, if you needed something done, I was there to do it for you. So, and that was going into adulthood. So it
Can I
changed.
ask you?
Mhm.
So, being the belle of the ball, the jokes, all that, like, so how did you feel? If you were to look back hindsight, like, the purpose of that. So you're assuming that if people liked you, is what
Mhm.
I kind of what I'm just thinking on top of my head, that if people liked me, then this wouldn't happen. So I have to be
Yeah.
likable.
I was,
Is that, am I
I
right at all?
became,
Or
I became the perfect people pleaser because it was really a case of if anybody really found out, they wouldn't like me.
oh,
So I became the people pleaser. That was a
how did
huge,
you
that was
feel
a
about yourself when you're
coping
doing that?
mechanism.
Like,
Oh, and I knew it. I knew it. I went to
did
a,
you like pleasing people, or was it exhausting? Like, I'm always
it
having
was
to keep up this
exhausting.
facade.
It's exhausting.
Eh,
Exhausting. It's
so
always
what was the
exhausting.
cracking point? Like, at what point were you like, I'm done? Like, I'm done doing this. I'm gonna be me and love it or leave it. Like, what did you have a point where you're
It's
like,
been a long
I'm through with
process.
this?
I'd like to say there was some great epiphany, but the Lord has opened many little doors because my prayer is has was always, um, Lord, I'm willing to be willing. Heal my mind, heal my broken heart, and then heal my body, heal my spirit. I was lean of spirit because I gave out of my surplus to try to make up for how bad I was and for how bad I felt. So it was always about trying to gain. But I had a situation. I was married, and uh, my husband ran around on me all the time. And we separated, and he left with her, and then he came back, and I took him back. And once again, I heard, you have to pray for her. And I said, I am not praying for this woman who still called my house and all this stuff. I said, no, I am not. Her name was Margie. I couldn't even say her name. And my best friend, who was Christian, and said, you have to forgive her. And I said, no, I do not. She said, yeah, you do, for you. You have to forgive for you so that you can move on. And I said, Lord, I don't know how to do that. And that's when I said, Lord, I'm willing to go your way. I'm willing to go your way, because this pain is unbearable. You know, everybody talks about addicts hitting bottom, or, alcoholic, but that term is difficult for me to envelop, but we all have a point where the pain, what do they say? The pain is so great, that you just can't stand the pain anymore. And I turned it to the Lord, and I began to pray for this woman. The first time I said her name, this was my very first prayer for her. I said, okay, God bless Margie. And I went in the bathroom and threw up. That's how deep the pain in my life was. Not just from that incident, not just because of her, but because of all the years that I had pushed it down, all the abuse. You swallow it and you push it down and you make it be okay, however you know how. And at that moment, it all just came out. And that was the beginning, I feel like, of the real healing. And it's taken a long time. Now I've gone through trauma sessions. I've gone through things regarding my father. I've gone through, and they've all helped me immensely. But what's helped me the most is just surrendering to the love of God and letting him love me. That's the healing.
By surrendering to the love of God.
Yeah.
So when you say surrendering to his love, like what do you mean surrendering love? Like just reading the Bible and just believing that when he says that he loves you, that he genuinely does?
No. No, it's not about reading the Bible. It's about relationship. It's about love and relationship. Okay. If you have a girlfriend and all you ever did was talk to her, but you never had a relationship with her, that's a different thing. We can talk about, Al and me. We have a relationship. We know each other very well, but we only know each other as well as we know each other sitting at a table.
Right.
So So the next process is the relationship. So it takes relationship with him, which is intimacy. It takes intimacy.
Yeah.
And when I say surrender, we're all so good at thinking we have to do something, like we have to do something to get healed. That's all works oriented to me. Now, if he directs you to go, which he's done, I've been healed from many things, many different ways, I can tell you. But every one of them had a purpose. Every process, every method has a purpose, because he knows the deep parts of you, that where the wound is and what needs healed. And he's a gentle, loving, kind God, and he will only do it so as to not cause you more pain.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So before we go, I know we only have a little bit of time.
I know. What?
Like, how is the inner message of shame and those different things, like, as you look back, do you still feel a sense of shame and guilt?
I have moments, I will not lie, but they're very
Yeah.
small. They're very not there very often. But when it's
Yeah.
hard when I see a pattern in somebody that I love, it kind of brings it up when I see the same pattern.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he's healed me from that because that's about identity. When you know who you are in him and you receive his love, that removes all of that as far as the east is from the west from you.
Yeah. Is there any way, as going out of this thing, that you would just uh, tell anybody about that's gone through that exact same situation? Because there's tons of people that have. That you just say, hey, do this. These are the steps. Anything specifically, you'd say, this is mandatory. Would you look back now and say, you have to forgive, even
You
though
have
you
to
didn't want to hear it at
forgive
the time?
and you have to say it. However it is,
Yeah.
you have to have a voice, and God can be your voice. You have to walk through, you have to be able to say it, and you have to forgive yourself and the perpetrators.
Yeah.
You have
Well,
to
we
forgive
really
yourself.
appreciate having you on. And I know we're running out of time, but I
That's
really
fine.
appreciate you coming on, Marta. It's a blessing to have you with us. And I'm sure everybody got a lot out of that. And we just
I
appreciate
hope
you
so.
guys coming on to the Underground Railroad. And just hopefully you'll show back up again. But thank you for coming on, just being just just honest with us. We really appreciate that. And we really appreciate your time and your willingness to come on here and talk.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to, and I hope someone knows that God is good and he loves you, and whatever you're going through, he can touch it. Just hold on to him.
We appreciate you joining Sam and Abraham on the Underground Railroad, and
The kingdom
we'll see you
age,
next
we
week.
the heroes
Bye
of
bye.
the